What happens when the most advanced technology of an era meets the most brutal, ancient force of nature? What happens when the unshakable pride of an empire sails directly into a frozen hell, a white world that does not want them there? In 1845, two Royal Navy ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, commanded by Sir John Franklin, entered the Arctic labyrinth and were swallowed whole by the ice, vanishing from the face of the earth. They left behind a silence that stretched for years, a few scattered graves on a desolate island, and eventually, whispers of a madness that drove civilized men to commit the ultimate taboo. This is not just the story of a lost expedition. This is the enigma of what men become when all hope is gone and the cold begins to seep into their very souls. The mid-19th century, the British Empire stood as a colossus astride the world. The gears of the Industrial Revolution churned, and a sense of technological invincibility filled the air. There was one final prize left to claim on the world map, a defiant blank space that mocked their dominance, the Northwest Passage. For centuries, this treacherous, ice-choked sea route through the Arctic had thwarted all who tried to conquer it. Britain decided it was time to end the defiance. To achieve this, they spared no expense. They chose two former bomb vessels, the Erebus and the Terror, ships already proven in the harsh climes of the Antarctic. Their wooden hulls were reinforced with thick iron plates. They were outfitted with converted railway steam engines, driving a single propeller that could push them through the ice at a steady 4 knots. This was cutting-edge technology, a brute force solution to a natural problem. The holds were packed to the brim with over 3 years' worth of provisions, tinned meats, vegetables, soups, and gallons of liquor. 8,000 tins in total, a feast meant to last an eternity in the ice. They were, by all accounts, unsinkable fortresses. Leading the 129 men was Sir John Franklin. He was 59 years old, a seasoned Arctic veteran, but also a figure of some controversy. On a previous disastrous expedition, starvation had driven his men to murder and cannibalism, earning him the grim moniker, the man who ate his boots. Yet, he was a man of influence and determination. This was to be his final glorious chapter. They sailed from England on a wave of national pride, filled with the unshakable confidence that only an empire at its absolute zenith can possess. They were not just explorers, they were conquerors, an iron fist ready to smash the ice into submission. In late July of 1845, the expedition was last seen by the crews of 2 whaling ships in Baffin Bay, waiting for the ice to clear enough to enter the passage. After that, a great silence fell. 1 year passed, then 2. The British Admiralty, in its wisdom, wasn't worried. This was part of the plan. Franklin had provisions for 3 years after all. But as the 3rd year approached with no word, no triumphant message, a quiet concern began to fester back home. That concern grew into a national obsession. Newspapers printed speculative maps. The public imagination was captured. Where was Sir John Franklin? The largest search and rescue operation in history was launched. It was a frantic, decade-long effort. Dozens of ships and thousands of men would scour the frozen, labyrinthine wilderness of the Arctic, a landscape so vast and alien it seemed like another planet. What they would eventually find, piece by horrifying piece, would be far worse than they could have ever imagined. The first tangible clues were discovered on Beachy Island. 3 lonely graves, dated 1846. The men had died early, likely from tuberculosis or pneumonia, but their graves were well tended, their headstones neatly carved. This told the searchers that, at least in the first year, order and discipline were maintained, but it answered nothing about the fate of the other 126 men. Where was everyone else? The real breakthrough, and the true horror, came not from British sailors, but from the Inuit people who had lived in this harsh world for millennia. An explorer named John Ray, listening to their oral histories, recorded chilling stories. They spoke of meeting a group of about 40 gaunt, desperate white men years earlier, dragging a heavy lifeboat south across the ice on a sledge. The men were starving, their faces blackened by frostbite, their minds clearly broken. Through gestures, they explained that their ships had been crushed by the ice. They bought a small seal, but it was not nearly enough. Then the Inuit shared a final, grim detail. Later that season, they had stumbled upon the final camp of these men. There were tents, frozen bodies, and clear, unambiguous evidence of the ultimate taboo. Skeletons had been dismembered. Cookpots contained human remains. Back in Victorian England, this was met with outrage and denial.
I don't believe it.
It was dismissed as the fanciful, savage propaganda of unreliable natives. Charles Dickens himself wrote scathing articles, refusing to believe that the heroes of the Royal Navy could descend to such barbarism. But the evidence, when it was finally found, was undeniable. Skeletons discovered by later search parties showed the telltale signs that forensic anthropologists now recognize instantly. Skulls with their bases smashed open to get to the brain, long bones cracked for their marrow, and knife marks on the joints consistent with butchery, not battle. The Unsinkable crew had been reduced to the most desperate act of survival. The final pieces of the puzzle remained hidden for over 160 years, swallowed by the sea. Then, in 2014, a discovery that shocked the world. Using modern sonar and guided by ancient Inuit oral history, the wreck of HMS Erebus was found, sitting almost perfectly upright on the seafloor, a silent, dark ghost ship. 2 years later, its sister, HMS Terror, was located in a nearby bay in even more pristine, haunting condition. The ships weren't crushed, as the stories had suggested. They were simply abandoned, left to sink in the ice. Underwater archaeology is now slowly, painstakingly piecing together the final days. They have found plates stacked neatly in the mess hall, jars of preserves on shelves, the officers' cabins looking as if they had just been stepped out of, and they confirmed another dark theory. The 8,000 tin cans of food, soldered carelessly with lead, had slowly poisoned the crew. High concentrations of lead were found in the remains. Lead poisoning would have caused paranoia, delirium, confusion, and madness, accelerating their descent into chaos. So what is the final truth of the Franklin expedition? It is an enigma written in ice and bone, a story that continues to unfold. We know the ships were trapped in the ice for 2 winters. We know their commander, Sir John Franklin, died early on. We know the remaining crew, led by Captain Crozier, made a desperate, doomed march south. We know they suffered from starvation, scurvy, disease, and lead-induced madness. And we know they resorted to the unthinkable to survive, for a time. But we will never know the true horror of their final days. The arguments, the breakdown of command, the descent into madness, the decisions they faced in that endless white world. The ships have been found, but their deepest secrets remain locked beneath the ice, a permanent scar on the history of exploration. A chilling tale from the Outer Enigma. The enigma is never truly solved. It only leads to deeper questions. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we continue to uncover the secrets of our world in Outer Enigma.